are here for the first time? It is, isn't it? The building always gives me goosebumps. It's really something. So we're celebrating our 300th anniversary for 3 years. Not going to give a lot of presents, but the building, they started construction in 1717, and then the first service was held here in 1719. So it was a long process. I could go on and on about how they built the building and how they made arches out of the wood, which took, it was all in 1 or 2 year process. So I hope you enjoy the building. A couple of things that we need to take care of for safety. If indeed there was a fire, which we never ever have, there's an exit right behind you, and there's also an exit over on both sides. And if you need to use any facilities, you go to Jenkins Hall. Welcome to get up and, you need to just go over to Jenkins Hall. You'll go in there, you'll see where they're working, making wreaths and all sorts of things for the Crow's Fair, which I think is the 17th, is that right? Most wonderful Christmas fair. But you'll see the big 2 bathrooms over to your right. So tonight, we're having, actually, I'd like to do one more thing first. Today's Veterans Day, and it is actually the 100th anniversary of the actual Veterans Day in World War I. Can I have everyone who has served in this military, who is a veteran, please stand. So tonight we're going to have an incredible presentation, multimedia in many ways. Greg Williams, who many of you know, has really become the go-to guy for doing interesting, exciting, historic presentations. He's done a series called Enjoy a Little Crime Before Dinner, which sounds dangerous. But there are a little series we have in the summer in June, July, and August. And he has talked about, and is well known for his talks about Lizzie Borden, Jane Toppin, who was a murderous nurse, interesting. I've got other people he's talked about. Sacco Vanzetti. He's also done a lot of historic presentations of just people like Jack Percival, who was the only captain of the USS Constitution to serve and navigate the globe in the USS Constitution. He was the skipper at the time, and Jack Percival came here and was born in Westminster. Many other people won't get into all of that. He was a lawyer. He first got a bachelor's in English from Western Maryland. Then he got an MA in English at Queen Mary College in the University of London. And then he got his law degree from Leeds University School of Law. His wife is here. Washington University. Washington and Lee University. Oh. Thank you. So Greg is entertaining and he brings history alive, which is always a nice thing to do. We also have our pianist, who will be coming out in a minute, Jacqueline Schwab. And many of you will go, oh yeah, I know why her name is familiar. She has been the pianist for many of Ken Burns' presentations, movies, television productions. The ones she has done with him have been Civil War, baseball, Lewis and Clark, Mark Twain, the war. She has performed at the White House with President Clinton. She's been on the NPR's Little PBS, Courier Companion, and CBS Late Show with David Letterman. Jacqueline graduated from the New England Conservatory in Boston, majoring in piano improvisation. And she says she's performed in almost every state in the Union. But I would imagine this is one of her favorite places to play. She gets into her music. I mean, they're both going to be fascinating to watch as they spin their arc. Enough. Can we please have Jacqueline Schwab and Greg Williams? Jacqueline has some CDs for sale if you
presentation of battle lines is the last that we'll be doing, and it is dedicated to Brad Martin, United States Air Force Sergeant, 1976, 1982. I went to visit Brad in the hospital one time, and the nurse asked me if I were family, and without thinking, I said, yes, brother. And that was not a lie.
you see millions of the mouthless dead across your dreams in pale battalions go, say not soft things as other men have said that you'll remember, for you need not so. Give them not praise, for death, how should they know it is not curses heaped upon each gashed head, nor tears? Their blind eyes see not your tears flow, nor honor. It is easy to be dead. Say only this, they are dead. Then add thereto, yet many a better one has died before. Then, scanning all the o'ercrowded mass, should you perceive one face that you loved heretofore, it is a spook. None wears the face you knew. Great death has made all his forevermore. A clerk at the National Bank of Baltimore was drafted. His name was Henry Nicholas John Gunther. His fiancee's name was Olga. Because of his German heritage, Gunther had not enthusiastically joined the army, but then he was in it, serving in a regiment called Baltimore's Own. By July 1918, he was a supply sergeant in France. The 23-year-old Gunther was demoted to private, though, because in a letter he wrote home, which the censors caught, he advised a friend to stay out of the war. Ashamed, he tried to redeem himself. After his unit arrived at the front in September 1918, he was wounded severely enough to be transferred out of the line, but he refused to go. In November, he and his sergeant were scouting in a foggy marshland when they came upon two German machine gun squads at a roadblock. The Germans fired at Gunther and his sergeant, but deliberately over their heads. The firing stopped. And then Gunther rose from the ground and, bayonet fixed, charged one of the machine guns. The Germans waved him back, but he continued on. The Germans were finally compelled to fire a 5-round burst. Gunther was hit in the left temple. He was killed instantly. It was November 11th, 1918 at 10:59 a.m. The armistice ended the fighting at 11 o'clock a.m. Henry Gunther was deemed the last Allied combatant killed in the war. Within weeks of Britain declaring war on Germany, German troops swept through neutral Belgium and in France nearly crushed French and British armies. But after the first Battle of the Marne in September, the familiar trench warfare of the Western Front commenced. Before the year was out, the Kaiser's son, Crown Prince Wilhelm of Germany, told an American reporter, "We have lost the war. It will go on for a long time, but lost it is already." and 2 weeks, 15 to 19 million dead, 23 million physically wounded. On the last day of the war, November 11th, 1918, Henry Gunther was only one of 10,944 casualties on the Western Front. Of those casualties, 2,738 deaths. On that last day, in the 6 hours between the signing of the armistice and the time it took effect at 11 a.m. 10% more casualties in 6 hours than on D-Day. And of course, Gunther was not the last soldier of any army actually killed. It took time for a word of the armistice to spread on the Western Front and beyond. And some commanders chose to press the war despite knowing the precise time it was set to end. The opening poem was by Charles Hamilton Sorley, a captain in the Suffolks. He saw early, he foresaw the millions of casualties the war would reap. The poem was found in his rucksack after he was killed, shot in the head during the Battle of the Loos in October 1915. He was 20. by the French Bois de Fourneau, the famous spot which in 1916, July, August, and September, was the scene of long and bitterly contested strife by reason of its high commanding site. Observe the effect of shell fire in the trees standing and falling. Here is wire. This trench for months inhabited, 12 times changed hands. They soon fall in. Used later as a grave. It has been said on good authority that in the fighting for this patch of wood were killed somewhere above 8,000 men, of whom the greater part were buried here. This mound on which you stand being, Madam, please, you are requested kindly not to touch or take away the company's property as souvenirs. You'll find we have on sale a large variety, all guaranteed. As I was saying, all is as it was. This is an unknown British officer, the tunic having lately rotted away. Please follow me this way. The path, sir, please. The ground which was secured at great expense, the company keeps absolutely untouched. And in that dugout, genuine, we provide refreshments at a reasonable rate. You are requested not to leave about paper or ginger beer bottles or orange peel. There are waste paper baskets at the gate. Pseudonym. Some credit a Lieutenant John Stanley Purvis as the poet, but there is little evidence that he wrote this bitter 1918 poem. Battlefields had become tourist sites since at least the Napoleonic Wars. Visits to World War I battlefields began soon after the war ended, mostly, but not exclusively, by people seeking graves of loved ones. As for soldiers who did return home, they were changed, not always in the gentle ways suggested by the next song, our audience participation number. Much dreaded, perhaps. This song explicitly recognized in a way that the war had dramatically changed the world. Politics, art, music, everything. Innocence was dead, supplanted by bitter irony. But the song also, apparently unintentionally, suggested the disconnect between the way the war had been viewed on the home fronts and the way it had been lived on the fields and in the trenches of Flanders and France. Not going to be a solo.
So, we invite you to stand up to sing intermission and join us for singing. We'll teach you the chorus. Maybe you know it. Some people know it better than I know it. I'm gonna keep them down on the farm and listening merry. I'm gonna keep them away from robbing, just around and painting the town. I'm gonna keep them away
Sir Osbert Sitwell served in the trench as well in the Grenadier Guards, always a less well-known poet than his sister, Dame Edith Sitwell. He died in 1969, more than 50 years after the war had ended. His poem is called The Next War. The long war had ended. Its miseries had grown faded. Deaf men became difficult to talk to. Heroes became bores. Those alchemists who had converted blood into gold had grown elderly, but they held a meeting saying, "We think perhaps we ought to put up tombs or erect altars to those brave lads who were so willingly burnt or blinded or maimed, who lost all likeness to a living thing, or who were blown to bleeding patches of flesh for our sakes. It would look well, or we might even educate the children." But the richest of these wizards coughed gently and he said, "I have always been to the front in private enterprise. I yield in public spirit to no man. I think yours is a very good idea, a capital idea, and not too costly. But it seems to me that the cause for which we fought is again endangered. What more fitting memorial for the fallen than that their children should fall for the same cause?" Rushing eagerly into the street, the kindly old gentleman cried to the young, "Will you sacrifice through your lethargy what your fathers died to gain? The world must be made safe for the young." And the children went. title of his poem, Futility, provides a theme we consider here this late afternoon. This poem describes soldiers trying in vain to rouse a fellow soldier they hope is only sleeping. Move him into the sun. Gently its touch awoke him once at home, whispering of fields half sown. Always it woke him, even in France, until this morning and this snow. If anything might rouse him now, the kind old sun will know. Think how it wakes the seeds, woke once the clays of a cold star. Our limbs, so dear achieved, our sides, full nerved, still warm, too hard to stir? Was it for this the clay grew tall? Oh, what made fatuous sunbeams toil to break earth's sleep at all? Poetry about the war continues. For this centenary of the armistice, the poet laureate of the United Kingdom, Carol Ann Duffy, has written a sonnet called "The Wound in Time." It was read earlier today at low tide on beaches throughout Britain and Ireland. It is the wound in time. The century's tides, chanting their bitter psalms, cannot heal it. Not the war to end all wars, death's birthing place, the earth nursing its ticking metal eggs, hatching new carnage. But how could you know, brave as belief, as you boarded the boats singing, the end of God in the poisonous shrapnelled air, poetry gargling its own blood? We sense it was love you gave your world for, the town square silent, awaiting their cenotaphs. What happened next? War. And after that, war. And now, war. War. History might as well be water chastising the shore, for we learn nothing from your endless sacrifice, your faces drowning in the pages of the sea. The next poem centers on the armistice itself. It is entitled, "And There Was a Great Calm on the Signing of the Armistice, November 11th, 1918. And it is by Thomas Hardy. Hardy is, of course, one of the revered English writers, mostly known for such 19th century novels as Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Far from the Madding Crowd, and Jude the Obscure. He was 78 years old when he wrote this poem in 1918. We might not think of Hardy when we think of World War I poets, but again, we do, not as we do with Wilfred Owen. Owen did not write a poem about the armistice. On November 4th, 1918, he was killed, ripped by machine gun fire, leading his men across a canal. 1 week later, exactly 100 years ago today, the day Henry Gunther was killed, Owen's parents, Thomas and Susan, answered their door as bells chimed in their village to celebrate the armistice. They were handed a telegram telling them of Owen's death. After Hardy's "And There Was a Great Calm," we conclude the readings with Owen's "Dulce et Decorum Est," which takes its title and lines from Horace's Odes, "It is sweet and proper to die for one's country." There had been years of passion, scorching, cold, and much despair, and anger heaving high, care lightly watching, sorrows manifold among the young, among the weak and old, and the pensive spirit of pity whispered, "Why?" Men had not paused to answer. Foes distraught pierced the thinned peoples in a brute-like blindness. Philosophies that sages long had taught and selfishness were as an unknown thought, and hell and shell were yapped at loving kindness. The feeble folk at home had grown full used to dugouts, snipers, Huns, from the war adept in the mornings heard and at eve times perused, to day-dreamt men in millions when they mused, to nightmare men in millions when they slept. Waking to wish existence timeless, null, serious they watched above where armies fell. He seemed to check his flapping when, in the lull of night, a boom came thence-wise, like the dull plunge of a stone dropped into some deep well. So, when old hopes that earth was bettering slowly were dead and damned, there sounded, "War is done!" One morrow, said the bereft and meek and lowly, "Will men someday be given to grace? Yea, holy, and in good sooth, as our dreams used to run?" Breathless they paused. Out there, men raised their glance to where had stood those poplars lank and lumped, as they had raised it through the 4 years' dance of death in the now familiar flats of France, and murmured, "Strange this, how? All firing stopped?" All was hushed. The about to fire fired not. The aimed at moved away in trance-lipped song. One checkless regiment slung a clinching shot and turned. The spirit of irony smirked out, "What, spoiled peradventures woven of rage and wrong?" Thenceforth no flying fires inflamed the gray. No hurtling shook the dewdrop from the thorn. No moan perplexed the mute bird on the spray. Worn horses mused, "We are not whipped today." No weft-winged engines blurred the moon's thin horn. Calm fell. From heaven heaven distilled a clemency. There was peace on earth and silence in the sky. Some could not shake off misery. The sinister spirit sneered, "It had to be." And again, the spirit of pity whispered, "Why?" Wilfred Owen's Dulce et Decorum Est. Bent double, like old beggars under sacks, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs, and toward our distant rest began to trudge. Men marched to sleep. Many had lost their boots, but limped on, bloodshot. All went lame, all blind, drunk with fatigue, deaf even to the hoots of gas shells dropped softly behind. Gas, gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling, and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smoldering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face, like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cut of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues. My friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old line, dulce et decorum est, pro patria mori.